Hey everybody, I'm Flake. I'm going to do another deck list for you. A little bit of a walkthrough as well. This one's a little bit more on the janky side. It's a little bit of Sylvan's Awakening, a little Living Lands nonsense that I was playing around with for 2 days, just kind of messing around with Sylvan's Awakening, pairing it up with different colors and seeing what we can get done. And this list that I'm about to show you is the best way to play it, at least in my opinion. I've had some success with it. We cruise through our dailies with it. Now, I don't know how this is going to do in best of 3, but in best of 1, it's damn fun to play. So let me just walk you through the deck, and you can tell me what you think. All right, so we're going to cruise through this pretty quickly, but the basic strategy of this deck is you're kind of prolonging the game to a point where if your creature and ramp doesn't get you in a good position early, it should be able to stall out to the point where you've got so many lands on the board, and generally speaking, not many people suspect Sylvan's Awakening as a win con. It's one of those sort of out of left field options that you can you can play it and see what you can do with it. I mean, this is kind of a surprising deck. Don't get me wrong. If you're playing in a best of 3 and they know it's coming, you're probably going to be a lot worse suited to win. But hey, I mean, ranked is best of 1, so why don't we just jump into that and see how far you can get with something silly like this. So we'll cruise through the cards over here, and I'll tell you why I chose them. I mean, it's a mainly green package in this deck over here. So obviously, when you're playing green, Llanowar Elf is just fantastic. No need to explain that. Llanowar Elf kind of ramps out your cards. Adventurous Impulse, same thing. But I mean, the strategy behind this entire deck is Sylvan's Awakening. I have 3 copies of Sylvan's in here because it's your win condition. It's what you're going to play to sort of surprise your opponent once you have 10, 12, 14 lands on the board, to just plow through him when he's not suspecting it. So that's your win con, your late game. This is something that you're going to play obviously way down the line. So you don't have to worry about mulliganing into it early. Just make sure that, you know, once you sort of suspect that you're in a position to win, start start cycling and looking for it. Now, when you're looking for cards, obviously Chemister's Insight ×3, that can potentially draw you, 2, 4, 6 ×2, so up to 12 cards a cycle there. You want to sort of cruise through your deck and make sure that you're getting that win con and getting the lands on the board. So how do you get the lands on the board at a faster pace? Well, it's simple. That is what our Wayward Swordtooths are for. 3 of these bad boys. They come in for 3, and they're a 5/5. And once you have the City's Blessing, you can start doing some damage with this guy. But the benefit of the Wayward Swordtooth, is that he allows you to play all those lands that you're drawing. So, if you're drawing lands with Chemisters, or you're drawing lands with, Adventurer's Impulse, this is a card that's going to go down and allow you to flood the board and just really dump your hand onto the board and fight for the board early. Now, he won't be able to do much for the first few turns, but you should have enough ramp and enough cards coming into your hand that he will come into play at a certain point. Now, how do you get those lands into your hand? Easy. The way you're doing that is via exploration. So before we get to even what we're exploring for, Wild Growth Walker, because you're going to be in a position early where you're not really threatening, you might actually be taking a lot of damage. Wild Growth Walker is a good defender, plus he keeps you in the game real early. So 4 times this bad boy, and obviously we're pairing him up with 4 times Merfolk Branchwalker. Now, when I'm making this deck, I was kind of thinking, do I want 4 of these, 3 of these? You can kind of tailor it. This is basic framework for you. 4 Wild Growth Walkers, 4 Merfolk Branchwalkers, and 3 Jadelight Rangers. Now, the reason for the exploration package is because if we're going to be playing multiple lands a turn, you want to be able to find those lands. Now, oftentimes with the Jadelight and the Merfolk Branchwalker, when I'm exploring, creatures are nice. If it's a very important creature, I'll keep it on top. Or if it's a very important, instant or sorcery or whatever, I'll keep it on top. But a lot of the times, I tend to just ditch things to the graveyard to look for lands if I have a Swordtooth on board, because I can just keep dumping cards and dumping cards. You want to make sure that you get that City's Blessing, have the Wayward Swordtooth, ready for action, have your Explorer creatures, your Merfolk, your Branchwalker, and your Jadelight Ranger on the board as well. Don't be afraid to trade. You want to sort of mitigate as much damage as possible while chipping away at your opponent, ever so slowly. But as soon as the Wayward Swordtooth gets into play, it becomes dangerous, especially once Tatyova comes on board. Now, Tatyova really is a great engine piece for this, because once she hits the board, Any land you play gains you a life and draws you a card. If you have a Sword Tooth, that could be twice a turn. So you're drawing 2 cards, so you're cycling your deck pretty decently. You're gaining life, you're sticking to the plan. Life is good. So let's just take a look again. Llanowar Elf for ramp. You've got your Wayward Swordtooth also to just keep dumping lands and making sure that all the lands that you explore into can be put on the board and you're not sort of slowing down the pace. Wild Growth Walker, along with a Branch Walker and a Jade Light Ranger package, is good for early game pressure, trading, life gain, presence, that kind of thing. You want your opponent to sort of expend some resources on these creatures and really be threatened by them to a point where, you know, he's got something to do. He's not focusing on you as much as he's maybe focusing on these more important creatures. Trade where you can, in my opinion, if you can kind of think about longevity, obviously, because your win condition is going to be Sylvans. But also I packed in 4 Root Snares. Now, this isn't Turbo Fog, so not some nastiness like that, but Root Snare for 2 as an instant is really important, because what's going to happen is if boards go wide, boards go crazy, and you can't necessarily activate your Sword Tooth on time, if you're not necessarily drawing properly, sometimes you just want to make sure that your opponent comes in full force so that they leave no defenses open. You surprise them with Root Snare. Next turn you hit him with Sylvan's Awakening. It's kind of something like that. Or if you're attacking with everything and you're maybe leaving yourself open to lethal, this could be a nice backdoor where your opponent just lets everything through, doesn't trade, and then next turn you root snare the damage, and then next turn Sylvans them. So 4 times Root Snare. It's saved me a bunch of times, keeps you in the game. Perfect. Tatiova again is a great engine piece. She hits the board. People tend to worry about her. Keep her alive as best as you can. I've got 3 copies of her in there, but her plus Wayward Swordtooth really gets the job done. With your exploration package, constantly drawing lands and looking for lands, this is a really, really good synergy combination. Gives you a card draw, cycles your deck, finds your answers, and then you're good to go. Finally, now this is a card that was one of the final pieces to it, because this deck tends to have issue with boards that go wide. Once there's tons of tokens, tons of nonsense on the board, it gets really difficult, especially now with a lot of white weenies on the board, or I've seen a lot of just lots of merfolk that really go wide and generate a lot of token merfolk. River's Rebuke gets rid of all that garbage. Now, it can be countered like any other spell, obviously, but the best part about this card is that it just goes, you target the opponent's board, sorry, you target your opponent, all their permanents go back into their hand. That includes their planeswalkers, their enchantments, and all that other nonsense. So it also opens up, let's say someone caught you with Ixalan's Binding or something of that nature. Everything goes back to their hand, and then it's on you to have a nice, beautiful, delicious board next turn while they struggle to put things back on the board for you to just go ahead and wreck face with. This is a great answer to tokens. Tokens don't go back into the hand, obviously. They just get crushed. They get squashed. River's Rebuke ×2 has saved me more times than I'd like to admit. It's a great card. Just, you know, mitigate damage. Make sure you get to the point where Sylvan's Awakening can become effective, and then go from there. I've had a lot of fun with this deck. The only thing that really gave me a lot of trouble was Shalai. Shalai was a giant pain in my ass. So that's why we have 2 detection towers as kind of the last little piece here. Obviously, the land distribution, do what you're comfortable. I find 6 island, 12 forest, and 4 hinterland harbors has been a great little mix. Obviously, once we get new shock lands with the new Ravnica set coming out, that's going to be great. Add those in as well. But 2 detection towers is great, because what this does is it kind of gets rid of Shalai issues, and it's just land. It's colorless land. It's not a big deal. Slap it on the board. It still becomes a living land with Sylvan's Awakening, and that's basically the deck. I mean, it's not going to get you anything crazy. You don't expect Mythic with this deck. It's just some fun jank that you can play with cards that are rarely used. I mean, I don't really see Wayward Swordtooth that much. Tatiova's got a cool effect, but she doesn't really see much love. And finally, obviously, things like River's Rebuke is cool. But I mean, Sylvan's Awakening, man. Like, turning your lands into dudes and just rushing face is really, really cool to see. It also makes for pretty epic wins. I mean, you just sort of do the calculation, you count it out, and boom, go for it. If you have Landwar Elves on the board, it basically turns your Landwar Elves into 2/2s. You just tap your Landwars instead of your lands, and then your lands come in, do the work for you. Bang, bang, boom. Live off the land, and that's pretty much how it goes. So hopefully you kind of can get... so we'll do a quick rundown again, because I want to make sure you get it. 3 Adventurous Impulse, 4 Landwar Elf, 4 Merfolk Branchwalker, 4 Root Snares, 4 Wild Growth Walkers, 3 times Jade Light Ranger, 3 times Sylvan's Awakening, 3 times Wayward Sawtooth, 3 times Chemister's Insight, 3 times Tatiova, twice of the River's Rebuke, and then standard lands, and then boom, 2 times Detection Tower. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy, no worries. So there you go, that's the deck. Like I said, don't expect Mythic with this deck. It's not what it's built for. It's built for fun, it's built for diversity, it's built for a little bit of different types of games. I've found that it does particularly well because it's unexpected, and a lot of people, once they see the exploration package, they're thinking more creatures and Golgari build type stuff mid-range. But in reality, I mean, that's just there to pull lands out of your deck and just get the ball rolling. Now, I have had success with the deck where the creatures have done all the work and Sylvans never came into play, but nonetheless, the win condition is Sylvans, so you want to get there. If you win on the way, hell, that's just gravy on top, right? Extra sprinkles, sounds good, tasty, tasty. Now, some extra cards that you might want to put in here, some little extra flavor. It's kind of one of those spice to your taste's delight. But some people were suggesting maybe that Vivian Reed could be good in here if you can get her to alt and etc. I didn't put her in here because she's not really part of the point of the deck. It seems like a win more card. But Mending of Dominaria is one that I really, really liked, because a lot of the times with Chemister's Insight, you're ditching cards. You're going to have a big hand, so tossing lands into the graveyard, getting them back with Mending of Dominaria is good. Not to mention, if you're playing long games, you might actually have trouble where you're cycling through your deck completely, and having the option of recycling your entire deck into your entire graveyard into your library will possibly save you down the long run. Sleep is another one. The sorcery Sleep. The only issue of me putting River's Rebuke instead of Sleep was because of the fact that Sleep just taps the creatures, doesn't toss them back into the hand. It also doesn't deal with enchantments and such. So I preferred River's Rebuke because it forces your opponent to repay for all their stuff and ditches tokens into the upside down. So hopefully you enjoyed this build. Give it a shot. If you have any more suggestions for other cards that might happen to go in here, I tried Sylvans with black. I've tried Sylvans with white, and I've tried Sylvans here with blue. I've just not tried it with red, though I do suspect that a Experimental Frenzy and a Wayward Sawtooth can do some sick and funky things, friends. So nonetheless, my name is Flake. Thanks again for listening. You can always catch me on Twitch at twitch.tv/watchflake or on Twitter at watchflake. It's been a pleasure. Be kind to one another, and we will talk very soon. Adios.